The alien Marines, hardened veterans of countless campaigns across the galaxy, had seen it all. They had fought on worlds where the air was poisonous, where the terrain could crush a creature in seconds, and where the indigenous life forms had teeth the size of their forearms. But nothing had prepared them for the day they encountered a Deathworlder. On the remote planet of Mavel, a world deemed too hostile for most species, the Treshk, a ruthless alien warlord faction, had set up a stronghold. Known for their overwhelming numbers and brutal combat tactics, the Treshk had enslaved countless species across the galaxy, and now they had set their eyes on Mavel's rich resources. But the Treshk were unaware that Mavel had its own secrets in the form of humanity. Sergeant Jacob Riles, a soldier of Earth's elite special forces, was one of the few humans who had volunteered to join an intergalactic peacekeeping force. His unit had been sent to Mavel to eliminate the Treshk threat and restore order. The Marines, equipped with the latest alien technology, expected the mission to be straightforward: wipe out the Treshk, secure the planet, and move on. They had no idea they were about to encounter a force of nature. It happened during the final push. The Treshk had set up a defensive perimeter around their command center, a towering structure surrounded by heavily fortified walls. As the Marines advanced, blasting through Treshk lines with their superior weaponry, they suddenly found themselves facing an unexpected obstacle. A lone human, Sergeant Riles, charged ahead, his movements faster than any of the Marines could follow. The alien Marines had heard of humanity's legendary resilience, how they could endure the harshest conditions and continue to fight no matter the odds. But this was something else entirely. The first alien Marine, a towering figure clad in glistening armor, raised his pulse rifle and fired. The blast hit Riles square in the chest, tearing through his combat suit and sending him crashing to the ground. The Marines stood in stunned silence, expecting the human to fall, to be finished. But instead Riles, blood dripping from the wound, pushed himself up with a snarl of defiance. He was breathing heavily, his eyes wild, and his pulse was steady despite the obvious severity of the injury. "Is that all you've got?" Riles grunted, his voice thick with pain but laced with raw determination. The alien Marines, momentarily stunned by the human's sheer will, watched in disbelief as he staggered forward, despite his mortal wound. His hands gripped his rifle, and though his movements were slower, they were still filled with lethal precision. The Treshk were beginning to realize that something was terribly wrong with this human. He had taken a shot that would have killed any other soldier, alien or otherwise, and yet he continued fighting, his eyes locked on his target. A second alien Marine, this one more calculated, aimed his weapon directly at Riles' head. With a sharp, almost casual motion, he fired, and the blast pierced through Riles' skull. For a moment, the silence of the battlefield seemed to freeze. The Marines looked on as the human's body slumped to the ground. But still, there was no victory cheer from the Treshk, no sense of accomplishment. They saw something they could not explain. Sergeant Riles' hand, though broken and mangled, twitched, and then slowly, as though through sheer force of will, his body pushed itself back up. Blood poured from the gaping hole in his head, and his breath rattled, a harsh, wet sound. The Marines could hardly comprehend what they were seeing. Deathworlders were known for their ability to survive extreme conditions, but this was beyond anything they had ever encountered. The human, with what was clearly a fatal injury, wasn't simply dying. He was still fighting. His face was a grimace of pain, his movements sluggish, but there was no surrender, no retreat. The Marines watched, unable to believe their eyes, as Riles advanced on them, his weapon still clutched in his hands, ready to pull the trigger. You should have finished me when you had the chance," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Finally, the Treshk commander, who had been watching the scene unfold, ordered the Marines to fall back. The sight of a human, despite being so grotesquely wounded, still on his feet, still intent on fighting, was enough to unnerve even the most battle-hardened of them. It was no longer a fight for victory. It had become a demonstration of survival, of stubbornness, and of the relentless human spirit. When Sergeant Riles collapsed, it wasn't from the injuries. It was from sheer exhaustion. He had fought until his body could no longer support him. The alien Marines, watching in stunned silence, realized they had just witnessed something far more terrifying than any weapon or technology. They had witnessed humanity's unwavering will to survive, even in the face of certain death. Word of the encounter spread quickly through the ranks of the Treshk and across the galaxy. The story of the Deathworlder, who fought until the very end, became a symbol. It was no longer just a battle. It was a message that no matter how advanced the enemies were, no matter how overwhelming the odds, humanity would never stop fighting. And no one, not even the strongest alien armies, could ever ignore that.